Okay, so thanks for everyone for coming out and warm weather, but that's usually big bucks today, so that's good. My name is Brad Corbett, Managing Director of MotionWorks, which is a employer branding and consulting company. And I am MC for tonight's event, along with our host, Sen Lu, and panelists, Jody and Hiroshi University Business School. So, yeah, thanks. Basically, tonight's event is really to promote the kickoff of the author's book, The Hardest Market in the World, written by Jansen himself. And, you know, when Jansen actually asked me to be the host or the MC tonight, I was super honored and appreciative that he asked me. But I did want to actually read the book first before I committed to a yes. And so he was able to give me a digital copy of the book. And yeah, I read through it. And it just, you know, the book itself just really makes sense. It's everything that kind of has gone on in the market in the last 20 plus years in Japan. So for me, it just really resonated and it made sense. What's going on in the market. And hopefully today I can get an actual signed copy of the hardbook as well as everyone else tonight. And so, you know, the book itself, and you'll soon find out in the end, it's really, you know, for leaders and decision makers in companies to, you know, really strategize and help growing companies, focusing on hiring and training and retention. And that's really what the book is about, and also tonight's event is to really give you time to focus on it. So thank you very much for your time. And right now I'll just introduce a panel. Okay, so let me introduce our host and panelists. First, Mr. Hiroshi, Professor of Human Resources at Tochihashi University Business School. Mr. Ono is one of the most cited voices on Japan's labor market and also author of Human Capital and Economic Analysis of Human Behavior, published in Japanese. A round of applause for Mr. And next, Ms. Jody Ono, a leadership development educator, also with Tochihashi University Business School. Ms. Ono designs customized leadership development programming for MBA level and executive education programs for Japanese and global companies. And Mr. Sen Lu, our host and author of The Hardest Market in the World, as well as the founder at Makana Partners, which is a boutique recruitment and search firm in Yokohama. And we will also have Ms. Kumiko Takahashi from Makana Partners talent management team, who will be talking more about assessments and onboarding services. Okay, so let's get started.
Okay, so thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight, and congratulations, Jansen, for the publication of your book. And so I do have a research portfolio. This is who I am. I'm a specialist in human resource management, and I usually talk about human capital, labor markets, and demographic change. I usually teach MBA students and executives about my research, but today I'm not going to really talk about my research. I'm just going to give you maybe trends to watch the labor market going forward. I think I mapped it into 4 topics. Okay, so let's get started on that. So I think the big picture is that Japan's population is shrinking much faster than usual. So I think last month the ministry gave estimates that fertility is declining much earlier than expected. And so the shrinking of the population is serious demographic challenge. This is also discussed in the first part of the book, in the shrinking supply of labor, right? And also we have a aging population. So that's basically the proportion of the people that are 65 plus. It's increasing at an alarming rate. If you haven't noticed that already, Japan is getting quite great, very fast. So like, why is this important? So this is like the macroeconomic challenge. So if you look at GDP as a function of like, output equals input times productivity, the input part of this equation is shrinking. Right? So that input part could be the population and participation rate and working hours. But like, if you think about the, for example, working hours, right? So okay, we can increase labor inputs by asking people to work longer hours. But is that a feasible option in Japan? No, because you already have a problem with overwork, and some people call it karoshi. But asking people to increase their working hours is not a sustainable solution. Participation rates actually is reaching a saturation point because women in the labor markets or people in the labor market, actually their participation rate is really, really high already, right? And of course, Japanese males, our participation rate is basically 100%. So increasing the participation rate is also not a solution. At the same time, you have a shrinking population, right? So this is a significant challenge. And of course, the one thing that I'm not going to have time to talk about today, the third part of the labor supply is migration, like foreign workers. I see that there are many foreign people here today, but that population is only like 3% or 4% of the population right now, and it's not going to increase in the foreign population. So overall, we have a bleak picture of demographic challenge. There's a shrinking population posing a significant challenge. So more than ever, we have this little beta is the productivity, right? So first of all, the shrinking population, demographic change is probably the biggest macroeconomic challenge that Japan, and not just Japan, but also the biggest countries face today. And second, there's going to be a significant more focus on the productivity side of this equation, right? So that's why I have, whenever possible, I talk to, I give talks about human capital, increasing the quality of human capital in the age of population decline. So that's the first trend. The second trend is that hiring trend rotation. So this also came to me as a surprise that recently, really recently, I think last month, the share of mid-career hires exceeded new graduate hires for the first time in 2020. So in Japan, we talk about lifetime employment, right? Internal labor market, lifetime employment, you recruit people from, new graduates, April 1st, everybody starts at the same time. You see these college graduates dressed up all the same, and they all go through the ceremony, and everybody starts at the same time. And so that's the way that it used to be. But now, as of last month, that population is also like a minority. So mid-career hires has actually exceeded new graduate hires for the first time. And this, to me, came much faster than expected. Last time from Singapore. Please.
That's my time.
Somebody? Oh, you're.
Yeah, I'll bring it back.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. So yes, mid-career hires share total hires is 50%. So these trends, why is the demand for mid-career hires increasing because of graduates? Well, I can think of several reasons, right? And first of all, I think everybody here is like, a lot of people here are HR related, so perhaps you understand this distinction between make and buy. And so like make is basically trying to develop the human capital internally. Buy is when you get these people from outside. So the internal development of human capital is becoming weaker than there's more focus on trying to get expertise from the outside labor market. So I think that's the first trend that we can think about. The other thing is that you significant generation shift. New graduates, young people are actually leaving their jobs much earlier than expected. I guess it is a solid market right now, so people don't stay in their jobs. So that's one trend that we can observe, and so this has also led to like, well, if people are actually staying in companies are not investing, right? So that's one way of looking at this. So there's another thing is that there's a lot of significant shift towards portable human capital. It's a kind of expertise that we can use right away. Right? So demand for technical skills is increasing relative to the major reward side. What's really interesting about this is that demand for technical school graduates, people who send in Japanese, is increasing. So we don't need college graduates anymore. And that comes towards this trend as well. So like university graduates, there's a expression called signal, right? Signaling credentials. University graduates are kind of necessary to fill the labor force because we believe that they were actually more productive than high school graduates. So the credential was kind of important. But as we approach the as we are able to collect more information about those productivity, we actually don't need the credentials. What we need is, again, it's like, people that can be productive right away. So I think we're starting to see a shift from signaling back to human capital, right? And the fourth reason, this is also kind of interesting, is that if anyone's here in the 1980s and 1990s, we had this bubble period where the companies hired as mad in the 1980s. In the 1990s, everything popped, right? And so when the market went crashing down, with Japan's long-term employment relationship, we couldn't fire people, right? So the 1990s, the 2000s, and 2010s, this is like 3 lost decades. This was a period of excessive labor that Japanese companies had to carry. Right? And that was a significant, that significantly undermined Japan's efficiency. So what companies are doing now, the market is actually doing pretty well, and the companies are becoming more profitable, but they don't want to hire because they don't want to repeat the same mistakes, right? And then lots of empirical studies about it. Labor economists have done a lot of good work in this area. That even as we return back to profitability, companies are less hesitant to hire workers. And that has a little to do with the third trend, which is that real wage growth has been actually negative for the last 4 years. Why are wages are rising but not keeping up with inflation? So why are real wages not rising? Right? So real wages is basically the wage growth that we count for the price increases. So yes, Japan nominal wages are increasing, but real wages adjusted for inflation is not rising. And this is a big part of the economic recovery is that people feel like they're poor. Their wages are going up. People feel poor because it's actually a net negative. Right? So again, this is a lesson learned for the last 30 years that in the 1980s, companies raised wages because the company was doing really well. But as the bubble economy collapsed, they couldn't lower wages. There was this thing called sticky wages, where once you raise the wages, it's really hard to come down. So right now, companies are actually putting in a position to raise wages, but they don't want to do that because once they raise wages, they can't lower it when the market comes down. Right? So the other point here, we might follow up on this later, is that the companies are maybe like hoarding profits, saving for a rainy day. And this is like good and bad, right? So think about the COVID crisis of like the first quarter of 2020. The markets went crashing, right? So the business cycle was crashing down. what happened in the United States is that unemployment, March 2020, went up from 3.5% all the way to 15% in less than a month. That is a significantly drastic, dynamic labor market, where people, if the economic downturn, are back asked to leave right away. But in Japan, that didn't happen. The unemployment rate in Japan in 2020 was very little. It was almost like nothing happened, right? And one of the reasons that Japanese companies were able to do this was because they had a lot of cash on them, right? So they retained their earnings, they hold on to the cash, and then they're able to salvage the workforce. They basically rode through the COVID crisis by burning through cash. Is what happened. Now, sometimes I talk to CEOs who are absolutely committed to the Japanese stakeholder model. They said, we have enough money, we have enough cash on our payroll to last 3 years. We can, even if the company went bust today, we can keep people on salary for 2 years. That could be good or bad, right? It's just a different way of thinking about running the company. And the other thing is that companies are probably not investing in the workforce. And this is an area that I could speak much more about, but companies are not investing in the human capital. And this again is the legacy of the last 30 years. As companies had excessive labor, they looked at labor as a cost and not as investment. So how can we save on labor costs? Well, we can basically suppress wages, and we're not going to invest in people anymore. And that, the lack of investment in human capital is actually another reason that I believe that we're having to slow economic recovery. The last part of this, is that okay if I, yes, the last part, yes, is AI, of course. This is very, very unpredictable. How is AI reshaping the labor market? This is, the economists are really divided on this. There's no consensus. Honestly, it's up to anybody's guess. Academics are very, very serious people, right? I'm not saying that practitioners don't do this. Academics, we need the data to make informed decisions. We don't have the data, right? So it's really, really up to anybody's guess. We have technology optimists, we have technology pessimists, and the optimists say that we're going to ride through this. This is a short-term adjustment, right? But one thing for sure is that it's going to change the demand for human capital, and of course, in human capital, there's this concept of human capital depreciation. So as more skills are needed, the old skills become obsolete. So it's going to expedite the cycle, accelerate the cycle of human capital depreciation so that people need to continuously upgrade their skills. The other thing is, the one last thing is that the importance of social capital, which also we talk about in your book, about trust and building relationships. This is going to be a very, very important capital. Aside from human capital, we need to cultivate networks, we need to remain relationships. And I think that's one of the implications of AI. So it's a very quick graph, but I'll pass it on to Jody.
Thank you very much. Next is Sen Lu.
Thank you very much, Hiroshi. Thank you, Brad. There's actually a lot happening in the recruitment world, and so what I wanted to do was distill it into one overarching story. And it starts with what Hiroshi just mentioned, inflation. So if you look at the graph, we've had little to no inflation for the past 3 decades. Actually, in many years, it was actually deflationary. But something happened in 2022, and that is the global inflation shock. You see, Japan inflation went from 0 to 3%. And I think everybody in the room will know food, clothing, and all consumer goods went through the roof. At the same time, people saw friends, colleagues get promotions and salary increases. And this in combination triggered something we call FOMO. Serious case of FOMO. And so what everybody else went out to do is look for that role that gave this 10% increase. On the other side of the coin, you see companies struggling to hire talent. So they see what's happening in the market and decide to increase their budget. But don't be fooled, they're not giving this money away for free. The job description might look exactly the same, but the role is very much expanded. You see HR take on GA responsibilities, sales take on marketing responsibilities. Actually, if you look at job boards, very often you see a lot of vacancies for certain companies, but you never see an urgency to hire them. Why is that? It is because companies are asking the workforce to double hat and triple hat, so they could manage the operations while at the same time save on human capital cost. Now, to the untrained eye, you see everything as in equilibrium, but actually we're beginning to see things crack. So the talent that went for the 10% salary increase is saying to themselves, wait a minute, I have 30%, 40% more responsibility. Overtime is piling up and they're starting to burn out. So what did they do? We're seeing a reverse trend happening right now where they're going back into the market and they're looking for a reduced role and a reduced salary, prioritizing work-life balance. So that, in essence, is what I'm seeing in the market in a nutshell. And I'll pass it back to Jody in the next section.
Okay, yes, and so I'll stand also. Hi, good evening, everyone. Jody Ono. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about leadership development in Japan, which I've been doing for about 12 years now, and just sort of think about the leadership element. It's a room full of HR interested people, and also in Janssen's book, of course, the topic of leadership comes over and over again because we're thinking about executive search and talent search. You know, you can't write a job announcement these days without the word leadership coming up at least 15 times, right? So it's a really interesting topic in Japan, I find. So the first sort of distinction I like to make is, so if I say I'm a leadership teacher, or if I say I'm a leadership development teacher, what's the difference, right? So what's the difference between leadership and leadership development? Well, I usually tell my students, I can't teach you how to lead. No one can do that. You can learn how to lead, but no one can teach you that. What I can do as an instructor is to guide you in learning how to become a leader of your own design. That's what leadership development is. And I believe that leadership development is becoming more and more discussed and sought after in Japan. So, for example, how do we do this? How do we approach leadership development? So, for example, in a company group, we might discuss these issues. Does leadership have universal issues, universal features that they share across borders and continents? What actually goes on when leadership occurs? How deeply have we really thought about what that phenomenon is? And why is leadership hard? Another question that I often ask my students is, if leadership, we have all these books and TED Talks and people like me standing here talking about leadership, but we seem to have all the answers. So why is it so hard to find really good leadership, right? Why does that seem so elusive sometimes? So those are the kinds of things we can talk about in a group. But as an individual, the process is much more around identity. It's much more around what do I stand for? And when I lead, or when I seek to lead people, what is their experience of me? And having enough self-awareness to be interested in that, all right? How can I keep evolving as a leader over time? And then I always ask every group I teach, what's your best learning resource when it comes to your own leadership development? Does anybody know? What's the best thing you've got to work with in terms of developing your own leadership? You, right? So like everybody walked in here with a whole set of experiences and knowledge base and mental models and all kinds of assumptions we're making, what we're carrying around all the time. That's the clay that you work with when you're developing as a leader. Okay, so that's just the distinction I wanted to make to start off. I also wanted to kind of talk a little bit about skills and the kinds of, and how I believe the skill set of developing leaders, not only in Japan, but most everywhere, is changing. So if you see those two lists, first of all, I would say that all the 6 things on the screen are skills. Would you agree? In other words, if we try really hard, can we get better at those? Right? We can. We can make an effort to improve our capacities, right? So what's the difference between the blue list and the purple list? So we kind of see the difference, right? But it's kind of hard to articulate. So let me show you another little bit bigger list. Okay? And another bigger list. Skills, right? So a lot of people look at this list and say, oh, hard and soft skills, right? Kind of. But I tend to avoid that, using those labels, because when we say soft skills, it makes them sound easy. And actually, as we all know, soft skills are really, really difficult, especially to master, all right? So what's interesting, and I think is what's going on in the talent markets and in workplaces now, is that this blue list, if you think about it, those skills, which, by the way, that I call the difference cognitive skills and non-cognitive skills. So these cognitive skills, if you think about it, those are all the things that got us to the position we're in the workplace, right? They're what got us through the school system. They're what got us through college. They were what got us our job, because we have been tested on those skills. Those skills are easy to measure and quantify and kind of prove yourself with, right? But if you look at the non-cognitive guys, initiative, integrity, resilience, these are all things we can work hard to get better at. But who's measuring them on us? Does that mean they're not important? No, I think they're actually really, really important, because if you think about the whole AI question, right? Well, pretty much AI can do all the cognitive skills, right? And it's really the purple list that I think we should focus on more and more, especially, as I say in my sessions, that as you advance in your career and you become a leader or you're an executive, it's the purple list that's really differentiating, right? You have many studies around CEOs saying, I never realized how much time I would spend on people. They call it people management. I don't usually use that term, but I spend so much time dealing with people. That's what CEOs usually say. I'm surprised by this, right? Okay, so that's something kind of going on, or just kind of want to put on your radar. Let's take a look at the World Economic Forum. Maybe you've probably all seen this, given what you do in life, but the World Economic Forum's Skills on the Rise report, Future of Jobs report, So if you think about back to the lists I just showed you of cognitive and non-cognitive, at the top you have I just chose the top 7, and then at the bottom 3. If you look at the top 7, it's really a mix, right? So of course, not so surprising that have AI, big data, and cybersecurity at the top of the list. We all know how important that is and the risk that those pose now. So no surprise. But creative thinking, resilience, flexibility, agility, curiosity, leadership, social influence, these are all non-cognitive skills, right? I'm a little bit sad to look at the bottom, right? We live in a country where dependability and attention to detail are really, really prominent. And we're proud of that, and we should be. But unfortunately, at least the World Economic Forum says it's not as important as we might want it to be. So, for example, when we think about how do we actually work on developing non-cognitive skills, how do we actually develop leaders for the future, right? Not develop leaders for the past, but develop leaders for the future. Just to show you the kinds of topics that come into play, right? So it's everything from, okay, yeah, we're so obsessed with leadership, but how often do we discuss followership and what really high quality followership is, right? How much time do we spend really crafting an identity as a leader, a philosophy as a leader, not as a manager, but as a leader, okay? So these are just kind of to show you what's involved. I also wanted to show you the kinds of thinking that this kind of a focus can produce. So these, it's kind of a composite of writing from my students. And I'd just like you to look at these 2 different examples. They're not supposed to be in opposition or anything. They're just 2 examples for you to see. And I asked them to, articulate, and I also do this with companies, I asked them to articulate, who do you want to be as a leader? Meaning, not what you want to do as a leader, but who do you want to be for others as a leader, right? And these are the kinds of ways that they answer. And it's quite beautiful. I think the first paragraph there, what really is striking, I do not want to become the kind of leader people recover from. I think that's really powerful. But what I'm saying, the reason I want to show you this is because I want more people in the workforce and in executive positions thinking like this. So let me just tell you a little bit more about what I'm seeing in my work. So young leaders as job seekers. So if you have young people, young professionals seeking to lead in the workforce, what are they looking for? They want to know the point of the exercise. Okay? Another way of saying this is they want to know the reason they're doing this. It has to be some kind of purpose, clearly articulated purpose. They don't want to have the sense of that what the effort that's put forth and the work they produce is kind of just goes out into the ether. They really don't want that. Reasonable pay, which is discussed. A clear path of development and skill acquisition. They know that the skills they have are fast becoming obsolete. They know this better than we do. So they want to know exactly how are you going to develop me? And, what will I be able to do, for example, in 3 years that I can't do now? Okay, visible impact, connection to the world. They want to make something happen. Digital integrated means they want the digital infrastructure to be up and running and in place. They don't want to have to set it up for you. Okay, they want it to be there so they can kind of hit the ground running when they go into work. Of course, culture-wise, open, inclusive, gender neutral. They don't want these gender issues at work. it's really interesting. When I talk to younger people, they're like, why, I'm a Gen Xer, right? I'm like, why are you always talking about, gender? I'm like, well, it's a big deal. But for them, I think they're just more inclined to not think of it so much as we do. And then they want less formality. They don't want to be stereotyped, and they don't want judgment going on in the workplace. They want a very non-judgmental, egalitarian culture. Okay. So this is what I see from the kind of seeker side. And then on the employer side, now this is not supposed to be an opposition, these are just a set of observations, okay? So company leadership cultures, companies are trying, okay? Like compared to when I came here 12 years ago, to what I see now, I see companies making a much better effort to do serious leadership development, not just throw training at people, but really trying to develop people. I can see that. So that's good. But, of course, everywhere in the world is struggling against its old leadership tropes, right? And its old patterns of decision making. Those were centuries and decades in the making, so they're not going to change in a few years just because we have AI, right? That they're very deep-seated. Takes a while. So generational shift, everyone's saying, oh, when the next generation of leadership in Japan kicks in, everything's going to be different. Okay, I don't know. Can't tell you. Social change, demographic change that Hiroshi was talking about, and the economic realities that Sen talks about. Those are actually helping to spur leadership development because they're increasing the sense of individual agency and decision-making over one's own career. So you see people in companies speaking up a little bit more towards their HR departments about what they want and don't want. Companies are open to digital, of course, but they're not quite using it strategically on an organizational level. To me, this is the biggest one. Seniority and formality remain the biggest constraints on leadership self-expression. When I first put that bullet point, I said, remain biggest constraints on innovation. But then I didn't want to stand up here and make that very grand sweeping claim because I'm not an innovation specialist. But I do know that seniority dampens leadership self-expression. And I do know that over-formality does the same. So if you can loosen up the organizational culture, you will get more leaders naturally, organically. And then finally, just language requirements are just too strict. They are like the old 1980s word, they're like a non-tariff barrier to trade for me in the talent market, okay? Actually, other skills are more important than language, right? We could have a long discussion about what those might be. That's it for me. I'll leave you with the slide. This is just a little bit more voices of young people about the kinds of workplace cultures they want and aspire to build. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's from all of the presenters tonight. We're now going to move into our kind of Q&A or kind of speed round. So what we'll do is I'm going to read off these questions and then each panelist will basically have not more than 2 minutes to answer a question on this. So we'll just kind of go through and I'll tactfully raise my hand when we're running over. So please wrap up as soon as possible. So for the first question, how does Japan compare to the rest of the world within your field?
Okay. Thank you. So I gave a talk at a business school in the United States several years ago, and it was full of HR people. And what really surprised me was that they all had these questions about how do Japanese companies, why are they so good at retaining employees? Because these companies were actually suffering from too much data, right? And so it's really, really different where, like, I think Japanese companies have low turnover. And that, again, could be good or bad. But in the United States, you have the opposite problem that's basically a leakage of human capital because there's just too much people moving around. So I think that's, as we talked about the difference between stakeholder and shareholder model, certainly Japan has a very strong stakeholder model, and the commitment to the industry is really still remains very strong. And I think that the companies are still committed to making that implicit contract. But I think what's happening now is that there are changes on the supply side, which is that the people, not the companies, especially the young people, are trying to feel less attached to the workforce, and I think that's one thing that to say.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so what's different about Japan? So I will say this, I think Japan's educational system, from the perspective of leadership development, Japan's educational system just offers fewer windows for leadership self-development. So I'm not saying, so what they emphasize is functioning well in a group. And that's a gorgeous thing, and I wouldn't change that. I think that's super important for being able to collaborate, work in teams and all that. But it's not enough. It's not sufficient for leadership development. We need to give kids more visible and processed leader development windows throughout their, and you can't start when you enter the workplace. You have to start when children are actually in grade school. And they really think about what's leadership for me, what can I offer? Next, the Ministry of Education, I'm waiting for their call.
When we compare recruitment in Japan with recruitment in the rest of the world, it's like comparing apples to oranges. For starters, if you're looking at the major economies of the world, the average unemployment is around 5%, but in Japan, it's half of that. So, from that perspective, it's very different. And when I speak to global and regional HR and TA leaders, they all tell me the same thing. We have every single market figured out, but Japan remains a conundrum. So if you go to the US, you go to Europe, you post a job, and you get hundreds of applications. So it's easy. You just need to filter, assess, and manage the pipeline. In Japan, you could post a job for 2 months. I see a lot of people are nodding. You could get 1, 2, maybe 0 applicants that you could actually interview. So fundamentally, that's different. And then also the talent is very different as well, the way they move. I would say overseas, they're very much opportunistic. So if there's an opportunity with higher salary, career progression, or a little bit more workplace flexibility, they'll at least field a phone call. But in Japan, if people are satisfied, they're not going to be answering your phone call, not replying to your emails. It doesn't matter the prestige of your company brand.
Nice. And next one is, how do you see AI reshaping your field of work? We touched on this a bit in some of the presentations, but I'll leave it open.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I think, well, first of all, I think in my view, it's short-term market correction. And I think that the long run will be that, this disruption that we're having right now will maybe fade out in the long run. And also, the second point I can make is that the impact of AI on the labor market will be very different in Japan and elsewhere, right? So I think that in the United States already we're starting to see some early effects of AI displacing labor in pretty large numbers, right? So I feel really sorry for computer science majors that entered the university 4 years ago, and then now they're graduating with computer science degrees and they can't get jobs, right? That's a drastic turnaround in just a span of like 2 to 3 years. In Japan, we do see some early signs that it's affecting the labor market, but it's not like what we see in the United States. And certainly, we're not going to have like large scale displacement effects from AI. So I think that Japanese companies, for better or for worse, will figure out ways to maintain a robust labor force without having these drastic changes.
So the question I get all the time is, how does AI affect, how we train our leaders? Well, I think it actually can really help because what I think AI can do is it can provide better practice. So practice in the sense, I usually think of leadership development like yoga, like the more we practice it, the better we get. It's uncomfortable in the beginning, but it becomes comfortable, right? So like if you have, let's take coaching, for example, right? I do a lot of executive coaching, also coaching with students. If you really try hard with coaching to do a really good job, it's very draining. There's only so much really good coaching you can do. And so that's something like if AI can provide like a level 1, level 2 kind of reflected aid, I think that can really make the job manageable to scale for coaches and leadership development instructors. So another thing it does really well is it creates scenarios to present to people, which I often have them, I say, create a scenario where this is going on in the workplace, and tell me like these different roles of these different people like in the office, and then get the students or get your, the people in the training to kind of play those roles. That's really effective. So the point is, it can really help with practice and preparation, but just as important is to remember that leadership is always in context and it's always in the moment. And AI can't do that. That's up to the person.
I've actually hosted a couple of roundtables on this particular topic, and I walked away with some interesting insights. For one, contrary to popular belief, tech companies don't have such a head start against the other industries. And the reason why is because they're very busy developing these products, and they're very busy selling it to all of us. They haven't had the time to implement it locally, especially within the back office function. And then also, if you imagine being a Meta, Google, or OpenAI, you really lock in your employees to be using your own product. So they don't actually have necessary access to the latest cutting edge model or applications. And then the third layer to that is the size of the organization. So there are a lot of tech giants out there. And as we all know, the bigger the company, the more stakeholders you have. And so it takes them a long time to get the buy-in from their stakeholders and to implement it into the organization. And by the time they do that, there's a new model. There are new apps that could do way more advanced things. And so in my mind, AI has really flattened the playing field for SMEs. And to answer Brad's question, I do think AI has been a huge game changer for recruitment. We're now able to transcribe and summarize interviews. We're now able to summarize and analyze the data as well. And using AI chatbots, we're now able to answer potential candidate inquiries and then even source candidates themselves. So it's a pretty interesting time and a little bit scary as well. But yeah, we'll be keen to know how it develops with AI agents moving forward.
Okay, nice. And the last question is really for Jody and Hiroshi. Sen is going to touch on this a bit in his book segment. So, where do you see Japan's talent, hiring, and workplace culture heading?
Okay, so to recap on what I talked about earlier, I think that we will see a bigger shift from make to buy, right? So from developing human capital internally to maybe purchasing human capital from the outside labor market. So this is another way of saying that less emphasis on firm-specific human capital and more a greater demand for general and portable human capital. And this also has repercussions for attachment. I think that, Jody talked a little bit about dependence in Japanese culture, but dependence in the labor market is basically a dependence between the employee and employer. Which is a good thing, right? So lifetime employment works because workers, there's an implicit understanding that workers will not be fired. And that's from the employer side, that workers will not just walk away from their jobs because they're committed. So it's like a mutual commitment on both sides. But sometimes that's what I call the unhealthy dependence between employer and employee. That sometimes, like older workers especially, they have nowhere else to go. And so they just kind of hold on to their jobs, right? And this is like an unhealthy dependence between people and organizations. And so, for better or for worse, I think Japanese society is becoming more individualistic, less collectivist. And this, in the employment relationship, means that weaker attachment to the firm, and this could, further accelerate the shift from make to buy decisions. And really, I think that people need to be a little bit more independent. That they typically what happens when you join a Japanese company is that we call this an internal labor market. Like you basically, so if you're a new graduate joining a Japanese company, it's like, well, the company makes all the decisions for you, right? Your career, you don't own the company owns your career. So you lose your sense of ownership. And the company will say, you're going to start off in sales, okay? And after 3 years, you say, well, why don't you move to Osaka? And then after that, you come back and you can do some marketing. After that, you can do HR. So you don't really own your career. But I think that if you have a good human capital, you can have a greater sense of ownership. And greater sense of ownership gives you more control. It gives you more choices. And choices basically gives you more freedom. And I think that gives people more empowerment and freedom, right? And so I think that is a path to happiness. Yeah.
Yep, so just very quickly, so I think there'll be more of a focus on individual contribution and autonomy because that is what will engage younger workers. That's going to be the reality that comes to the fore. I'm not sure what that looks like in Japanese workplaces. I'm not sure exactly what that will, it's hard, a little bit hard to visualize, but it doesn't have to look like everywhere else in the world or anywhere else in the world. It can be its own unique manifestation here, and maybe it can even be turned into a point of competitiveness for Japan. So let's think about it that way. That let Japan think about its workplaces as a potential area of competitiveness and attraction. That'll be interesting to see. Thank you.
Nice. All right, definitely good stuff from the presentations and also from the panel discussion as well. A lot of this is covered in the book as well, and also after when we have time after this to discuss as well. So now we're going to jump in, and Jansen is going to talk about the book.
Before I jump into the book, I'm curious to know, do we have any other authors in the room? I know Hiroshi, you're a serial writer. We don't have, oh, really? Okay, not yet. I was expecting like 10%. 10%
Not
in the
everyone's
room.
writing a book.
Well, Hiroshi, you have my utmost respect as a fellow author. And for those of you that have yet to write a book or is aspiring to write a book, I have a piece of advice for you. Please don't. Unless, of course, you want to lose some sleep and a little bit of hair, as you can see. In any case, I did get a lot of encouragement during the book writing process from Jody and others in the audience. And once I finished the book, I got two common questions that were asked to me quite frequently, which is, how long did it take, and who is this book for? I could let you know it took almost 3 years on and off, and the past several months being quite intense. And this book is actually written for anybody interested in the Japan talent market, and also people in this room involved in the recruitment process. So whether you're a candidate, agency recruiter, or in-house talent acquisition, there's something in it for you in this book. But most of all, it's written for overseas hiring managers who's just beginning their journey of recruiting in Japan and asking the question, why is it so difficult? And wanting to do something about it. So let's go into the content of the book a little bit. If you open up your book, you can see that it's broken into 3 major sections. 1, the landscape, 2, the playbook, and 3, the long game. So the landscape is what we've been talking about this evening, where I go into a little bit detail about low English proficiency, low unemployment, aging demographics, and also talk a little bit about what makes Gaishikei companies as well as Nikkei companies attractive and unattractive. But during the research of the book, one of the most fascinating things that I learned was actually about Japanese labor law. So I don't know if anybody knows this, but Japanese labor law basically didn't exist prior to 1911, where we implemented the Factory Act. So before that, Japan was rapidly trying to modernize because it didn't want to get colonized by Western powers. And so what we saw was factory owners sending recruiters to poor farming villages to find workers. And recruiters would be offering parents lump sum cash in exchange for their daughter's labor. And so we saw young girls as young as 10 working in cotton and silk factories at the time, and to pay off this debt. And it was very difficult to do because they had to pay off for the food, the dorms, as well as the tools used at the factories. And they had to work very long hours, so they had to work 16-hour days in very horrendous environments. So that led to tuberculosis and sometimes even death. So it wasn't until the Japanese government realized this was killing the younger generation that they implemented this Factory Act, which then limited working hours to 12-hour days. Another thing that was quite interesting is the Constitution of Labor wasn't implemented until post-World War II. And that's when we first start seeing the modern resemblance to the current labor law, which is 8-hour workdays, equal pay, and minimum wage. And so many people think that had created lifetime employment, but it's actually not written anywhere in the Constitution. It was the judge's interpretation of the text that really made it very difficult for companies to dismiss employees, and it's become the social norm these days. So that's the landscape. In the playbook is where I go into the techniques and strategies to use within Japan recruitment. I argue that word of mouth and a company's reputation is a lot more important than the company's advertising on the job boards. And that in Japan, it takes a very long time to build a relationship with the talent pool. And so that's where agencies add the most value. One example I gave was one particular search that we did with a global entertainment company. They were looking for a head of HR, and they were really struggling direct sourcing for 4 to 5 months. We started the search, and within 2 weeks, we shortlisted 5 candidates. 2 went to final, and we were able to close the search within 3 months, give or take. And then the APAC head of HR came to me, Yunsen, we contacted the same people, they just never responded to us. What happened? And I said, when I approached them and they know us as a friend rather than a stranger. We've known them for many years. And they nodded, and then they realized how difficult it is to recruit in Japan. The third part, the long game, is where I look into a crystal ball and try to predict what will happen to recruitment in Japan. We've already talked about how powerful AI is and how it can automate a lot of the operation work. But I believe that the human element is never going to go away and never be automated. The human element is still needed to communicate and influence decision makers as well as candidates. It is needed to make decisions and decipher between what's important and what's not. But of course, I am biased as I'm a recruiter. So in off chance that this does not happen, I will join you at the UBI line. So that's the book in its entirety. You have a copy in your hand. Please enjoy the summer reading. I look forward to everybody's comments. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for that. Next is going to be Ms. Fumiko Takahashi from Makana Partners talent management team, who will be talking more about the Makana assessment and ongoing services.
Hi everyone, good evening. I would like to introduce. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Fumiko Takahashi. I left Microsoft last summer and I joined Makana Partners as HR consultant to design, develop, and implement this service. So tonight I would like to present the new services that Makana Partners is developing. So please go to the next slide. So companies has 2 risks to manage. So one risk is before hiring, decision risk. So you have a lot of interviews, but there might be some difficulties to find out if the new hires behave in the new environment. So that is one risk. The second risk is after joining, integration risk. So even strong candidates might struggle if the new environment is not so clear. So expectations are not so clear. And also if he or she do not understand culture, so that is integration risk. So Makana Partners will provide new service. The first one is assessment. So structured insight before he or she join the company. So we will provide assessment, and so talent acquisition team use this assessment to provide the final offer. So in the assessment, so you can find if the candidate has a role fit, leadership influence style, and stakeholder relationship, and also risk areas to validate. So next slide, please. And the second option service is onboarding services. So after candidates join the company as new hire, we will provide service. This is not day one orientation. This is the structure onboarding processes. So for example, so we will work with the company's hiring manager or people development team to clarify success expectations and find out key stakeholders, and also identify, understand the culture. Then create 90 days 90 days priorities. That is the second service. So these services might be useful for people, the company who hire, of course, senior or critical leader. That is one. And also there are some uncertainties about candidate fit or post-hire success. And also 90 days, first 90 days complex, or stakeholder alignment is complex. Also, it might be helpful if you will hire as a stretch-based hire or potential hire. So even those people are not, we might not be fit as the day one. So if you will provide support, they will grow and reach the expectation. So that is the part of customers. So, and we will prepare the flyer in the gift bag. So if you are interested in, please have a look. And if you are interested in, please contact me or Makana Partners consultant. That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Fumiko. So we're introducing this new service. I'm writing a book. It's a little bit confusing with this event, but I want to emphasize that we are an executive search and recruitment company. And yeah, I do have the team with me. So Mike, are you around, Mike? Yep. Okay, Mike. So Mike is our life science and manufacturing senior director. Ella cannot be with us this evening as she's in Canada usually. Masa? There's Masa. He is our financial services consultant. You've met Fumiko, and do we have Koji in the room? Oh, Koji's in the back. And he is going to do some interviews. So if you have any comments about the event today, and if you were reading silently before the panel discussion, please make some comments on the book. We have Andy. Where's Andy? Oh, hi Andy. Andy just joined us. Yeah, 2-3 weeks ago, right? So Andy is going to be leading our IT and consulting practice. So welcome, Andy. And Ken. Where's Ken? Oh, there's Ken. So big thanks to Ken who made this evening happen. He was the glue, and he's got yeah. So give him a round of hand. Thank you very much. And thank you, Brad, for facilitating. Really appreciate it, as well as Hiroshi, Jody. I think, yeah.
Thank you very much. All right, so that wraps up the evening. We do have live music, actually, starting from Mr. Michael Shingo Crawford, who will be joining us. Is he here? And yeah, feel free to discuss the topics we talked about. And thanks to everyone for the panelists and the hosts tonight. Please give everyone another round of applause.